Um,
Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Hunter O'Haney, and I'm the director of Stonewall National Museum here in Archives in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and happy to have everybody here. And let me take a moment to introduce Bex Mui to everybody. Bex, say hi.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah. And so we were just talking about this, but we're happy to have you all here for this next installment of the SNEP program. And tonight we're going to be talking about LGBTQ inclusive curriculum, which Bex will be delivering it. But just to, I think some of you probably know, my colleague Emery Grant, who was here with Stonewall for a little shy of 8 years, has decided that he is going to complete his degree, go back to school and complete his degree, as well as spend more time with his family. He grew up in upstate New York, and so he wants to spend time with his siblings and nieces and nephews, and so get out of South Florida. And I can certainly understand that in the middle of July. I'm not so sure it's going to feel so great in January, but I say that as a boy from New England and very happy here in South Florida. But so we were very happy that Bex has taken over, and so Bex is in Oakland, California, and some of you may have met her at other SNEP events, or possibly even through GLSEN events or other things that have happened. And Bex is going to be our new director of our LGBTQ curriculum conference. And so Bex will be taking over the execution of all of these events that some of you have signed, or all of you have signed up for the rest of the year. I don't think any of those dates are going to change. Bex will be following up with all the presenters and making sure that all of that stuff is there. But then also this summer, Bex and I will be working on retooling this entire program and really trying to figure out how in this next stage of how we meet together and with in the post-COVID world, whatever that's going to look like, how we can figure the best ways to be delivering this information. In particular, we're interested in LGBTQ inclusive curriculum, both the creation of it and the delivery of it for both educators and for administrators. So in a nutshell, that's kind of where we see the future going. The schedule will stay the same as we posted, and we'll go through that. But then this summer, we'll be thinking about reshaping the program for 2022. I don't have any answer yet as to whether it's going to be virtual or in-person or hybrid or any of those things. It's too early to make some of those decisions right now. I will say one thing: if you have any ideas about any of this, and about as you think about how the program has helped you in the past or how it may help you in the future, please, please, please don't be shy to send anything to me at Hunter at stonewall-museum.org, or to Bex, and that is Bex at stonewall-museum.org. And we'll be taking, and I'm sure we'll be doing some assessment as well too as to what people's needs are. But even if they're just informal things that you want to shoot us an email to say, you know, think about this or think about that as an idea moves you, please always feel free to move them along, because the delivery of this content is really through you to other individuals and kids and their families to help them succeed in their lives. And we're not in the classroom, and we are not in the administration, but we certainly are dedicated to LGBTQ culture and how it can work in a curriculum from K through 12. Some of you have been here, I know. The archives have over 2,700 linear feet. There are over 6 million pages of LGBTQ history here. And the library, and the picture that you see here, has more than 28,000 volumes. So it's an unparalleled resource. There are probably only 2 or 3 other places with as much physical resource in the United States on LGBTQ topics as we have. So be sure to reach out to us. So with all that, I'm going to hand it over to Bex, and I hope you guys have a great session. I'm going to stay on for a little while here, and I will. I'm just going to shut my camera off, but I hope you guys have a great session this evening. And Bex, good luck for your first session with us. And again, thank you very much for joining the team.
Absolutely. Thank you, Hunter, and thank you for that introduction. Hello, everyone. Bex Mui, she and her pronouns. Very excited to be here. I do know some of y'all, and so excited to see you in this new context. I'm really delighted to be here, stepping in to help ensure that the incredible programming that Emory had put together can continue to reach the educators and administrators like you all. As Hunter mentioned, we're not in the classroom and not inside the schools, and so it's really critical that we kind of provide this space just for you all to learn from each other, as well as to be able to facilitate and support some of that learning with some resources and some information that we have. So with that in mind, what we'll be doing today is focusing on implementing LGBTQ+ inclusive curriculum. And I guess the other thing I'll just say as a quick introduction for myself, both in this role and as I'll be supporting these virtual events throughout the rest of 2021, is that I do come from an education background. I was a classroom elementary teacher for 10 years, mostly in New York, and now I am in Oakland. I also worked for GLSEN as the education manager for 5 years, and have done advocacy around LGBTQ+ advocacy and curriculum development, resource development in K-12 schools for most of my career. So I'm really delighted to be here again in this New York context, and I'll talk a little bit more about how we'll spend the rest of our hour together. So our agenda today, we've kind of done the welcome, and after this, I'll do a couple of quick housekeeping, some time for us to have introductions. After that, I'll talk, I have about 10 minutes, 15 minutes of information on LGBTQ+ inclusive curriculum, including recommendations and resources. But a lot of this program today, what I'd love to do is give you an opportunity to share, to talk in small breakout rooms, and to learn from each other. I think the work that you're already doing and understanding that you are the keepers, again, of so much of the work that's going and what's needed. So I want to make sure to have opportunity for you to both look at the resources, see how they best apply to you, and also to learn from each other. So we'll do that, and then we'll have some time to report back, and I'll answer any questions as I can when we come back together. So that's sort of the ebb and flow of our time for the next hour, and then we'll close. And I did want to mention you're welcome to stay on with us for half an hour after that to have kind of a happy hour or just social time. Really, I think a part of this is our learning and also our networking, understanding that the work we're doing, we're not doing it alone, that we can do it and perhaps do it stronger together. Couple of technical notes, just being mindful of mics. I had moved this to a meeting format versus a webinar format, because again, I do want to make sure that you're able to see each other, to speak with each other, but just be careful in that sense that it's not going to automatically mute you. So if you're not speaking in a small group or sharing at the end in our kind of whole group share back, please keep yourself on mute during that time. The chat is your space. Please feel free to chat me privately, to chat us together, to chat each other. And I will be getting to the chat. So if during the presentation, when I'm talking about LGBTQ+ inclusive curriculum, if you do have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I won't be stopping during that time, but I will look over any questions that come up while you're in breakout rooms and make sure to address them afterwards. And also, video is up to you. This is the end of a, I'm sure, long day in the middle of a week of likely work for many folks. So just want to do a quick check-in of yourself and understanding that if you'd like to have your video on or off, please make that decision for yourself, which kind of goes into the grounding guidelines. Just really quickly, please do choose when and how you participate. This is a great opportunity. If you've been at Zoom all day, if you've been sitting all day and you'd like to take the time, especially while I'm presenting and going over some slides, to close your camera, to stand up, to remember you have a body, to drink water, please do. Please take care of yourself in whatever way feels best, and just honor that. When we do have group discussions, when we do have whole group discussions, just being mindful of making space for others, inviting yourself to take space, and depending on the situation. being sure to speak from the I. So if you can, when we are especially talking about advocacy work, identity work, it's really important that when we're sharing that it comes from our own perspectives and our own unique eyes. And then a quick note just around confidentiality. Again, we'll be kind of working together, giving you an opportunity to share about some of the work you're doing and even some of the challenges you might be facing. And so please take those stories as they apply to you, as they are helpful to your advocacy, to your teaching, to your work. But we'll keep the stories of exactly, names, schools, locations. We'll leave that in this space to ensure that folks feel that they can kind of share where they're at without it coming out. So any questions around those guidelines or anything else that you'd like to offer to the space before we continue? If anything comes up, please feel free to chat it. And what I'd love to do now to get started, if you will chat your names, your pronouns, and where you're coming from. You can just get a sense of who's here and where you're coming from. So feel free to chat that in. And I'd love to do just a virtual who's in the room. So for this, I'll close the PowerPoint so that we can see each other. And so I'll just type in here the check-in too. So name, pronouns. If you want to chat that. Thanks, Rachel. And then what we'll do is just get a sense. Let me stop this here. Hi, everyone. So we'll play this. Has anyone done virtual who's in the room? Great. It is new. So what we'll do, to some folks. So I'm going to list some facts just to get a sense. So if you have, if this applies to you and is kind of like a yes in a space, you'll turn your camera on and we'll get a chance to kind of see. So if everyone could start with your cameras off, that would be great. Wonderful. So please turn your camera on and take a look if you work in elementary. I always like, sorry. Hi. Like I said, I came from elementary. I think that queer inclusion in elementary is such an important foundation. Happy to see you. And we'll talk more about that later. So you can turn your cameras off and turn them on if you work in middle school. A couple of middle school. I see. All right, thank you. You can close your cameras and then turn them on if you work in high school. Great. Let's see who the folks are. Thank you so much. You can turn your cameras off. And please turn them on if you are an administrator. In some kind of administration in the school setting. Great. Thank you. And please turn your cameras on if you have like a mental health professional role or a counselor or a social worker, psychologist. Yeah, always helpful to see. Thank you. And then please turn your camera on if you are a GSA advisor or work in some kind of run a club or focus club. Always great to see you. Great, thank you so much. I'm going to get back to my PowerPoint. And now you're welcome to turn your cameras on or off as you feel fit. And I'm going to, again, at this point, just go through LGBTQ+ inclusive curriculum. If you do have questions, please feel free to chat them. And again, I'll get to them at the end of this presentation. I wanted to start by looking at some state mandates when we're thinking about LGBT plus inclusive curriculum across the country. These mandates can be really helpful to see, one, for language, if you're looking at bringing policy implementation into your state, if you don't happen to be in one of the states that already has it, or also just to be aware of what's being called for and where this is happening. I wanted to also point out, as folks know, I'm sure working in schools, there's always a gap between implementation, particularly statewide, or policy change and implementation. And so even, for example, California, which passed both an LGBTQ plus inclusive history bill and the Healthy Youth Act around LGBT plus inclusive and comprehensive sex ed, although these are passed statewide, there's still a wide range of implementation and so much information that needs to be happening around how it's actually taught and what it looks like in classrooms. But again, it is really helpful to see where this progress is happening and to look for it for language if you're trying to both implement things in the school base and also just kind of see what's being taught across the country. You can also see that there's a lot of progress that was made in 2019. Even Oregon's passed in 2019 to start in 2020 in January. Obviously, we've had a year. I don't need to tell educators in schools the effects that this has been, but I think it's really important to just hold that there was a lot of progress being made and somewhat of a pause during the needs of COVID and the switch to online schooling and just the uncertainty of a pandemic. So we are hoping that there's, as we look forward to the 2021-2022 school year, that a lot of the progress that had been made, particularly around inclusive curriculum for LGBTQ identities, that can be kind of brought up and reintroduced and moved forward. I also just wanted to note that there is also 5 states that still have like no promo homo or laws that are where it bans the positive teachings. So it's important to kind of also hold that when we're thinking about where LGBTQ plus inclusion and inclusive curriculum is happening in the country and where what the experiences of queer youth might be. I also wanted to note, thinking about currently the Equality Act, it is on the Senate's floor. We are hoping that that is passed, and that would really be a lot of advocacy support and kind of a game changer in terms of the ability to bring LGBTQ plus inclusive curriculum on a national level. When we're looking more specifically at inclusive curriculum, I wanted to just bring back this framework around windows and mirrors. Likely folks have heard of this as it pertains more specifically to LGBTQ plus inclusive curriculum. We're looking at, windows as in a diverse and positive and accurate representation of history and people that exist in the world that have always existed. And then mirrors, of course, looking at and validating students' experiences. I think this is particularly important now because we do have a lot more media representation around LGBTQ identities, a diverse range of LGBTQ plus identities, and particularly young people being able to see themselves and find community and feel connection on TikTok. Gen Z has this way to connect in social media that I really think that, in schools and in curriculum, we're really working to match. And so they understand what it's like in many contexts to see themselves, to be seen, and the benefits of that. And there can be a feeling of when they come to school and that's not happening. And so just understanding and also kind of seeing the progress in that. But it can be, validating, celebrating, I would even say, their experiences, and also, the positive mental health supports around reinforcing their self-worth, their self-esteem. I also wanted to just note the importance of an intersectional approach to LGBTQ plus inclusive curriculum. Intersectionality, of course, being a term that was coined by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw to talk about the experiences of Black women in America who were facing discrimination at the intersection of racism and sexism. So it's also used in this context to think about LGBTQ plus identities that are living at multiple marginalized or system impacted intersections. An example here, thinking and leaning on Stonewall, is really centering the history, the experiences, the advocacy of Black and Latinx trans advocates, Marsha P. Johnson and Silva Rivera, and ensuring that when we're talking about history, we're highlighting folks with a variety of identities and bringing their stories and that history into our classrooms. We also, these are just a couple of considerations when you're thinking about how to bring inclusive curriculum or strengthen the inclusive curriculum present at your school. Of course, thinking about the diverse representation, the multiple experiences in what we consider like the LGBTQ plus, community. There's so many rich experiences within that. So ensuring that both in the identity that you might be teaching and also in the history and representation. Also considering social emotional learning, as I mentioned, and as I'm sure you know, this year, it's been a lot in on the emotional learning and for young people. And so there's a lot of movement for social emotional learning and time. And especially as we consider, wrapping up this year, the changes that are still happening, planning for next year, really bringing in an LGBTQ plus inclusive curriculum and lens to social emotional learning work that's happening in schools is both a great way to meet the needs of queer youth in the school, especially queer youth with other marginalized identities like queer youth of color. But it's also a really great way to consider bringing in inclusive curriculum that can reach young people across grade levels, across schools, that it's something that isn't done in any one particular class.
Special parent meeting with, parents of athletes to explain daily testing and what the requirements are to be able to play certain sports.
I wasn't sure if that was a question. I will take questions at the end. I did hear something around sports, and we can definitely talk about that in your small groups and later. But also, absolutely, it is a great need to have LGBT plus inclusive curriculum, particularly around gender identity, expression, and stereotypes in PE. Integration throughout the year, so ensuring not just that there's integration throughout different classes, but looking at when LGBTQ plus inclusive, identity, and again, affirming and celebratory representation, when that's existing throughout the year, that there's something happening at the beginning of the year, that it's part of the get to know you and welcome to the school year and the foundations. That can be such an incredible part of setting up the foundation, that it's a part of curriculum night at the beginning of the year, and then discussed throughout the year at multiple occasions is really the best for an integration. And yeah, just considering also the ways in which, again, I'll share some resources next and provide you some opportunity for that. But thinking about the classroom environment in which the lessons are being taught, you can have the most perfect, the most inclusive, lesson. And if that lesson is the only thing that's happening around LGBT plus inclusion, if it's the only time young people are seeing themselves, and then there isn't necessarily some support around how to have that conversation, how to bring in their peers, the rest of the year, it's not going to land as strongly for their development and have the positive benefits that you want. So considering the classroom environment, the school environment, and also just how many other supports. It was great to see so many of y'all are GSA advisors. Having that club in the school is such an incredible support to either reinforce some of the lessons in inclusive curriculum, or just to be a space for young people to feel seen and to go if they need that support. But those kind of supports are also really valuable when you're thinking about bringing in and extending the inclusive curriculum that you're offering. So in terms of resources, and again, I'll share a Google Doc with links to these for you to kind of look over and see what's the best. You really are the keepers of your curriculum, the keepers of the best understanding of your school, the school environment, and being able to see which types of inclusive curriculum would best fit now, in the future, for your school. So I'll just kind of offer a variety of places where you can find free lessons that are LGBTQ plus inclusive and really celebratory. So I wanted to highlight elementary. I won't spend too much time because it's really not a huge elementary audience here, but I do want to highlight, the important foundation that it can be to begin these conversations in elementary. And some of the free resources around that come from the Welcoming Schools program, which is elementary specific, Glisson's Ready, Set, Respect, which is free lessons for elementary. And then there's also a book, Reading the Rainbow, which looks more specifically and has case studies and examples of how to have these conversations in read alouds in elementary, both picture book in lower elementary and reading group in upper elementary as well. In terms of history, I wanted to highlight a couple of resources that might be useful to you. Outwards, it's free videos that are about LGBTQ plus pioneers. It's a great opportunity and resource for being able to share, especially if you're still in online learning or if you have some kind of smart technology to show videos to your class. They're a great way to kind of show the faces and have an interactive way to bring LGBTQ plus stories and history, really into your classroom. Quist is an app that's an LGBTQ plus inclusive curricular app. It's gauged at around 12 and up. And it is a great way for young people if you are bringing kind of like a tech lens, again, particularly during online schooling, that might be a valuable way to bring in queer history to your students. And then a lot of resources from Learning for Justice, formerly Teaching Tolerance. They have a couple of lesson plans, essential questions, and learning plans that also can be supportive around history particularly. Finally, I wanted to just highlight an inclusive curriculum guide. That is a resource that will be that I'll share in a moment. This resource is a way to kind of checklist and look over your own curriculum to see what are the places that you can integrate LGBTQ plus visibility into what you're existing. Although it's really valuable to be able to take a unit that's been made and lessons that have been made and bring them into your teaching, it's also valuable to look over your mandates, your existing curriculum, and see where you can add some spaciousness and diversity and LGBTQ plus stories, history, affirmation into that. So this is a resource that can help you to do that, as well as it has some suggestions and lessons for different curriculum and different ways to respond to anti-LGBTQ plus comments, or just ensuring that you are having a supportive classroom environment for the container where the lesson kind of lives. Everyone, welcome back. So I'd love to just hear how it went, things that came up, questions or things you want to share with the group, and also, yeah, I just want to acknowledge the questions were really focused on like how to implement LGBT plus inclusive curriculum, which is kind of like the focus for today. You may not be working on specific curriculum, and so hopefully you were able to talk around your role or your advocacy, or to make some type of connection that was valuable. Please bring that into this space as well. I am, as y'all know, kind of new stepping into this, but I'd love to get to know kind of folks that have signed up for this series and what you're looking from it, so I can kind of tailor in the future when we meet together. But for now, hopefully you were able to have some connection and a valuable conversation just with other folks in the work. So I'd love to just open it up for folks that would like to share something about your conversation.
Well, I guess I'll talk. I mean, do my video. All right. So one of the things that I brought up, I'm just gonna make a really long story short of what I was talking about in my group, but within our school district, we are working on requirement for high school students where they're going to have to take a class in ethnic studies, but I think they're trying to integrate a concentration of gender identity studies into that as well. So I think in the forefront of our changing world that we're in, I think it's excellent that our school district is now going to be making that a requirement for each and every one of our graduating learners. So I'm very proud of my school district for that.
That's wonderful. What area are you coming from?
San Diego. Mr. Dadman and I are both from the same school.
I noticed a lot of San Diego folks in the RSVP, so happy to have y'all here. Go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just saying I'm from San Diego too.
Great.
One of the things.
Share anything?
Yeah, I'll just say one of the things that I was saying was that I wish there was more mandatory professional development for staff, so that it's not pockets of schools or humans that are interacting with youth, that it becomes the norm, because that's what it is. And another thing that kind of I mentioned that makes my skin crawl is kind of dedicating like a week or a month or a unit to instruction, or having, you know, like Black History Month, and you'll only read about it in February. It's I guess my challenge is how to make this where it's not a standalone for our staff members, right? We're asking staff to be more inclusive. And so how do we make it where it's not like, now this week we're gonna study LGBTQ people, you know? So that's where my challenge is and where my skin is crawling.
Yeah, thank you for naming that. I'm seeing a lot of nods, and definitely resonates with me. You know, doing career advocacy in a school setting is like in June, suddenly everyone had my email. Suddenly everyone was, at last week of May, everyone was wondering, you know, what I do and how we can help and what's out there. And, you know, it's really unfortunate also just like timing wise that it was always the end of the year. You know, a lot of times folks will do something and it's like, and then you're out the door. And it's like, you know, where were these young people all year at what we think they were learning and doing? And so I do think that, especially for looking at a diverse and integrated approach, like making sure that, you know, if we are going to have these months, like we do recognize, right, that we do still need times to bring more visibility, more time, depth into marginalized identities, right, into people of color, into our stories, and just making sure that those are also done with a queer and trans lens, right, that we're like also able to do that. I think is the challenge, and thank you so much for raising that. Anyone else want to share something that came up, or something that they're something that's going well, something they're working on in terms of?
I wanted to say I agree 100% with what you guys are saying. I think another challenge is that if you show a student a picture of a person of historical significance who's African American, they can see that they're African American. If you show them a picture of someone who's LGBTQ plus, they won't necessarily know just by looking. And you know, I wouldn't want it to be a situation where their gender orientation or, you know, had to be like spotlighted, where something had to be like, you know, he was an important architect and he was gay. He was gay, folks, you know, something like that.
Yeah.
And it would also be a lot easier if it was woven into the textbooks more. I think the textbooks, so, you know, obviously we're in California. I think the textbooks that we have predate the legislation that you mentioned. So it's not part of the textbooks.
Yes. You bring up such important points. You know, I think, and I'll also just say also around race, like I'm mixed race Chinese and Polish, and, you know, not always read that way. And so I think there is so much around like identity that's depth in so many areas, right? That is why having specific time and curriculum to talk about identity, you know, formation is so important when you do have that like critical like time to talk about it and can bring those conversations in. I have known some folks to do kind of both. Sometimes they will name sexual orientation like in an author study all the time, so that it also is like raising visibility of like how many heterosexual or presumed to be heterosexual, you know, people that they are studying in a given unit. So there's some folks taking that approach. And then I've also seen folks that are bringing in, for example, like in STEM, just like acknowledging that, you know, LGBTQ visibility in like STEM or in science or in math, you know, heroes aren't being taught, aren't being told, and doing like a quick like 5-minute intro every, you know, month or every lesson of like highlighting a queer scientist or like highlighting, you know, just like doing that so that it's both spotlighting but also in a positive way, and under the context that we understand that it's because we like live in a world where it wasn't being taught. Just as some quick examples that come to my mind, curious what other folks are doing or how they kind of tackle that. And also, yes, textbooks, like I was saying about just education in general, trying to keep up with like the world that Gen Z is living in, you know, that our young people are, their availability of information, you know, the world that is tailored to them, and then versus curriculum and print resources. I think that is definitely that disproportion, especially during the last year of online schoolings and how, you know, we got information for the past year. I think that is really going to be something that schools need to address in order to do this work well. Have a little time if anyone else would like to share something that came from your conversation or a question that you still have.
I just wanted to say thank you because I'm looking at these resources and they have a nice range. So thank you.
You muted, Bex.
Yes. Oh, it's bound to happen at least once. Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share this. And again, in this range, I really tried to share folks that are no worries. And folks that are resources that are free, so that there's also pointing you to some specific resources that I've used or that I know folks have used, but also, you know, highlighting some programs that have a lot of free and available resources. I think your point, Casey, about there needing to be, you know, more professional development that's mandated. You know, I think a lot of the times we're talking about how to integrate LGBTQ plus curriculum, you know, within a given year, within a given school, but really like within, you know, different schools, different places in the country, you know, different school classrooms in the same school. There's so much variation. So it's really so interesting to see what young people, you know, are taking, are learning, and there really is really wide gaps. And so I agree. I think, you know, looking at teacher prep programs too, looking at professional development that's like reoccurring is really important.
I mean, I could talk all day, so I don't want to over talk. So Ramona, you go.
I just wanted to apologize, you guys. I have been trying to get a hold of this family for the whole year. So I'm usually the one that's always muted. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And then finally I did a home visit. So I left my paper. So I was like, oh, so I'm so sorry.
No worries at all. Thank you so much for joining. Congratulations. I know what that's like. And you know, from my time in teaching, absolutely very glad. And we have recorded the session, and I can also send a copy of the slides for folks that are interested in that, or can just send that out if you weren't able to, you know, be with us for all of that time. And also wanted to just share that there is a listserv that I've created just so that I can both get a better sense of folks that are interested in professional development, both the virtual offerings that are already scheduled and things that we might be able to build in the next year, in the next school year. I'd really love to be able to tailor the resources and the archives and the educational offerings, to the folks that need it. And again, you are the ones in schools, you're the ones understanding what your communities are in need of. And so if you're interested both in receiving updates or also, potentially giving feedback and just to get reminders of the things that we're offering, there is a link that's linked here, and I'll also send it out in a follow-up email after we close today, but just to give you a heads up that there is a way that we'll be kind of keeping track. And if you have, other educators in your schools or in your networks that you think might be interested or benefit from some of the virtual offerings or want to be connected to some of Stonewall's educational offerings, please send it on. Yes, and I'll definitely send over the slides and resources. But that's really all we had for today.